Another question.
One more question. What was the most profound thing Karl Kinser told you?
Oh, God.
What I picked up from him is he was such a intelligent in a way of just Midwest values, hardworking, sense of humor, but so sharp that when I was around them, it seemed to me that he knew everybody on tour. And he knew what chassis everybody was running. He knew what engines they were running. He knew what heads they had on. He knew what cams they had. He knew everything about he knew when they, I remember saying, well, if the other guys aren't putting on new tires to qualify, I don't put new tires on to qualify, because if they do, that's an extra tenth, so then I'll do. And the more I listened to him, he'd know like how many races they had on a motor. Like he'd say, well, Sammy, they switched that motor out, they got that motor in, that motor has 10 races. What I'm getting at is, this is the way I would summarize it, is he was at a table playing poker and he knew everybody's hand. You didn't know his. So how are you going to beat him?
Wow.
He knew the game so well, and he knew everybody. He probably knew what torsion bars were in their cars. He probably knew who their shock builders were. He probably had guys in dyno rooms calling him saying, hey, Sammy's motor dynoed at this. Yet he was building his own motors, so you didn't know what he was doing. But he seemed to have a handle on the whole pit area. So how does the guy at the poker table lose when he knows your hand? What are you gonna how are you gonna beat him? He's got you covered. That's the sense I got from being around it. That's what it felt like to me, watching it. And he was so sharp, he was so mechanically minded. And he would watch his car and he'd know what that car's doing, and he'd know what his driver's doing. And he knew the RPMs the motor was turning, he knew what cam was in it, he had such knowledge. He had knowledge from top to bottom. And he was a psychologist with Steve. He knew how to motivate Steve. He knew how to poke Steve. He knew how to get Steve motivated. He had it beat from every angle. Every base was covered. He couldn't lose in the long run. There was no way, if you look at his outlaw career with Steve and Mark, the percentage of races he won, it speaks for itself. It's in the record books. That's kind of why I think it's kind of funny when they talk about the greats and the mention Kyle, and Kyle has like 30 outlaw wins, maybe?
Something like that.
And Steve had 690. I don't know how many Carl was, and Mark had what, 200?
Right.
I mean, Carl was probably involved in, I don't know, 700 wins.
Who knows how many people he actually helped a little bit.
But I mean, it was dirt track genius at the highest level. And it's too bad I didn't have a camera to film that back at the time, but it was something that I'll never forget. And I would be excited. I go, man, they rolled the car out. Couldn't wait to just stand there for hours just to hear what they were talking about. But Karl, just such a great person, just sense of humor too. It's storytelling.
Do you think they had a leg up on Sammy?
Yeah.
Because Sammy seemed to be all about just him being car chief.
I think so.
He didn't really did Sammy ever really have a crew chief? It was
not,
always him and only him. He was kind of like you.
Yeah, you wonder.
You were the Sammy.
If you want,
you are the Sammy. You want it all.
But you do wonder if Sammy would have drove instead of Steve, or if Wolfgang would have drove instead of Steve. I think the result would have been the same. I think Steve and Sammy and Doug were pretty equal behind the wheel.
But Doug and Sammy were kind of the crew chiefs of their stuff, right?
Sammy was. Doug wasn't. Doug was with Weichert.
Well, true.
He had Deuce Terrell and
right.
But Doug was knowledgeable.
Right. Well, Steve had to be somewhat knowledgeable.
Well, he was knowledgeable, yeah, but
it wasn't
Sammy.
wizardry.
I mean, Sammy was doing it all.
Yeah. Tires, everything.
Well, he called all the
He
shots.
started Goodyear making tires. You heard that story, right?
Sammy would try stuff. He'd have coilover cars. He was inventing stuff. He was on and off the tour. I mean,
is there admiration in the Sammy route of doing it? How he did it? Is there anything that you're like, well, what Sammy did on his own was kind of a little bit more admirable than the Karl Kinser, Steve Kinser way of doing it?
It's two different things. I mean, history will show.
Obviously, in the stat column, it's not comparable in the stat column.
But Sammy had his moments.
And he did it his way, his own.
Yeah, but I think sometimes to his own detriment.
Right, that's what. Yeah. That's
because
what
he would try things, and Steve and Karl were just on the rails, man. It was for those of us or those who never saw it in its full force. They missed something. If you didn't see Steve Kinser in his prime, you missed the show. I mean, it was something.
No comparison to what Kyle's doing. Or is it just that much of a different game?
No, we got to see Kyle in the COVID year, or the N-word year, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, there is a comparison there. I mean, Kyle and Silva, did they win 40 races?
Something like that, yeah.
40 out of 80?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say there's comparisons there. I mean,
but
Kyle's greatness, too.
The only thing I would say on that is like, and Kyle agreed when I said this, is the difference between what Kyle did one year and what Steve did for prolonged periods of time is it's sometimes easy to be the hot rabbit one year.
Yeah.
It's hard to be the hot rabbit and everyone else sees what you're doing and keeps keeping up. And you staying ahead is hard for that long that Steve did it.
But still, I have trouble believing that if Kyle and Silva were together, they would get worse.
I'm not saying they'd get worse. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, you're saying
other people catch up.
I don't think they would.
I think you're wrong. Seeing it every year.
No. I think Kyle's better.
Well, you are from California, you're right.
I think Kyle's the best.
Okay.
You think someone would start to beat you? Think Gravel? You think Schaar? You think Sweet? Who would beat him? Name who you have beaten him? You think Silva and Larson, if they said we're going to run the Outlaws for the next 10 years, you don't think they would dominate like Steve did?
They would be close. But for every Steve, there's still a Sammy and a Wolfgang.
Yeah. But I don't think I don't know. I think those three drivers, I don't know. Brad Sweet's pretty good.
Sweet's pretty good.
Are you saying Sweet's better than Wolfgang? I mean,
Schuhart's pretty good.
Yeah. We'll never know.
Phil Dietz, in my opinion, Phil Dietz is above Silva.
But you're crossing. You're trying to.
Phil Dietz is above Silva, in my opinion. In my opinion.
Yeah, but you're trying to compare things that happened 40 years apart.
Well, that's what I said. Is it just that different? I was trying to let that be the out. But is it incomparable? We don't have a King-style driver like, well, not a King-style, but a King challenging style driver like a Sammy. There's no one out here that is a car chief driver that is performing at that level.
If you had Bell
would well, and I've said it before. Larson and Bell are Sammy and Steve. They can't make the money in dirt racing like those guys could, so they had to go somewhere else to make it.
And I'd be out there with Buddy. So you'd have
and there's Wolfgang. Keep on adding on. Now we can talk gravel. Now we can talk others. They're there. The guys out there to give Larson and Silva a run for the money every week is there. They're just not there anymore because of the system.
But we're just all guessing. The Kinsers did what they did.
I mean, Bell's a bad motherfucker, man.
Yeah, but we'll never know. It's just conjecture. Look what Mark Kinser did. You're talking hundreds of wins, not 4 or 5.
I'm pretty sure Chris Bell's the last driver to win on a flatbed trailer, an outlaw race. in a Keith Coons car that they didn't even think they were going to use, just pulled it out to the track and he won the fucking race in. A Keith Coons wing car.
Yeah, but it's a big money guy just putting it on an open trailer.
Well, at that point, he wasn't a big money guy. At that point, he was a midget guy.
Keith Coons was a big money guy?
Yeah, I thought you were referring to Bell, but it's still, how many people are pulling a car out of the fucking, oh yeah, take that car and going and winning outlaw races. That don't happen.
Well, because no one's doing it.
Because no one's as good as Christopher Bell was at that time. Bell and Larson are very comparable. And like you said, Kofoid's there. I don't think that domination, if you had all the hitters there with Silva and Larson, if you had these other players intact, like we used to, our stars don't go.
But didn't Kyle just win 40 out of 80?
Where was Bell?
You're taking out one guy.
Well, where was Kofoid?
He was
we got to sprinkle guys in. I'm just saying, it's all probability. It's not reality.
But the Kinsers did was real.
Yes.
We didn't conjecture it.
Right. I'm saying that being a Kinser and a Karl, or a Kinser group, staying ahead year after year is not you getting slower. It's everybody else getting faster. They're always working to keep up. Late model racing, this happens all the time. Like this year's Ricky Thornton Jr., last year was Davenport. He dominated everybody. Year before that was Overton, because these other guys are always working and going and getting better. And late model racing never sustained our issues. Their stars and drivers pursued the dirt career.
Is this guy still on the line? Did we answer his question?
He is still here.
Okay, do you need to know anything else? It's been 2 hours. Did we cover everything?
Oh, well. That's remarkable. I'm a big fan of Karl, Steve, Sammy, Wolfgang, all those guys from that era. I have similar feelings about Sammy because I think that he kind of did Karl's and Steve's job at the same time.
Yeah.
So I have respect for him.
There's a level of admiration.
I mean, when you talk about the 80s and you didn't get to see it, it's a shame for people who didn't. Chaz, you weren't old enough to see it.
No.
So it's just something that happened 40 years ago.
This is how we ride. This is how we do. Riding mud, sliding up high.